This amazing character was created within just 2 days with my new AI workflow. And today it's time to break it down into details. You guys asked for it, so in this video we're gonna cover all details such as how I separate image into the right parts, how I do generation, retopology, low poly, texturing, baking, all that stuff, including materials and rigging. I'm gonna share new tips on how to achieve more realistic look that I never shared before, so stick around till the end. And of course, we're gonna enjoy it in Unreal Engine in all its beauty. This video absolutely requires your support, guys, by hitting that like button, and let's get started. And today I prepared an amazing reference. I was brainstorming for a while already. Well, actually I was keeping it for a special occasion, which is today apparently. We do have Queen of Hearts, but in a very unique style. And there's a lot of details I want to show you how to do. We do have quite cool hair. We have details in the hair that we're gonna put. I think like we're gonna use these spikes here. We have an amazing armor, the clothing, and everything is very logically assembled here. Of course, I was creating this reference, and we have an amazing weapon. And today I'll show you one new approach to materials, how to make this nice look for metal, for example, with AI, of course, but in a smart way. Now, what is the first thing we need to do when we do have our character ready to be created? We're gonna need to put it into the default pose. In 3D, default pose is A pose or T pose. Choice might depend on engine, animation, system that you're gonna use, and the character itself. I prefer to go with the A pose. It's more convenient. Also, I use AccuRig and it works better with A pose, and overall I find it more convenient to work with. And of course, we're gonna need to separate the weapon. And you might ask, what is the prompts I'm using? Well guys, the thing is, I do not do any prompting. I basically go to ChatGPT and say, I need the prompts to extract my character in A pose on a white background. That's it. Please do the prompts. And just like that, I do have 2 prompts that I can use anywhere basically. My preference goes into Nano Banana Pro or 2 and GPT Image 2. They are extremely good, and there's plenty of way how you can get access it even for free. And guys, in this video I'm gonna use a bunch of tools that are best in my opinion, but all of this is also possible using only free tools. Link will be here so you can get idea about the tools and repeat the same workflow. Now, when it's clear how I do the prompting, we're gonna need to separate parts. And here's the bunch of parts I do have. Now here, it's very important to understand the logic, how you're gonna assemble your character, how you're gonna process it, what materials and stuff you're gonna use. And this one is very important, and if you watch my videos, you might get the logic. Like for example, I for sure gonna extract hairs and the heads, but hairs and heads and pretty much all the accessories that are in here are gonna generate in low poly right away, because generating in low poly will save a lot of time dealing with some mess that can be done with merged hair strands. While I really appreciate Tripo P1 doing logical meshes such as this, you can see all the strands are pretty much separated, and that is exactly what we need. Same goes for the heads. I think P1 does really good job with these loops and stuff, and there's not much details on the head, and it will be way more convenient to work with such mesh further. We're gonna just cut some faces here and place our eyes, and it pretty much looks perfect for me. However, for all the armor, I'm gonna do that high poly first. Why? Because I want to bake and preserve these details later. We're creating game ready character, so it will be eventually quite optimized. But those details are very important and nice. So to simplify my thinking here is, if I have quite a lot of details on some objects, I rather start with high poly, do some sculpting, fix that until perfection, then do low poly on top and leave the room for baking. For some very simple objects, almost no details, again shape is simple object in a way that like it's just a clean surface. Hair is a unique case, and accessories like this, just a small things that doesn't really make sense to do high poly. While pants and grease 100% gonna need to be high poly because there's like some small folds, there's small details, and I really want to preserve that details when I'm gonna do the low poly version, not only in texture but in normal map. Here you can see all of my final parts. Some I added the multi-view. Again, if there's something that you want to specify, you can add a multi-view. like I did it for this part, for the body, for the pants, some simple parts like greaves, gloves. I did one image, that should be enough. For hair, I also did a multi-view. And additionally, I did a neck armor separately because that's more convenient. And also, one important logical decision, which you see will be reflected later in how I split materials, is how I separated legs, for example. The metal part alone and the clothing part alone. That simply make it easier to work with. And we have all models generated. Now note, at this stage, I don't really need a texture, so I generated all the models without the texture, saved some tokens, and we are ready to take it all to Blender. So at this stage, we do have a bunch of high poly models, which I did with HD model in Tripo. You can set it like to 1-2 million of polygons. That doesn't really matter. We're gonna still only use it in sculpting mode and then do the retopology. And small accessories, hair and head, I did with Smart Mesh. When using Smart Mesh, it's very important to set right amount of polygons. For head, for example, I used 5,000 and get this result. It will be not the same result with 20,000, which is max possible. And for small pieces like this, we can actually go for 500 and that will be enough. So take a look, do not skip that setting. It's very important setting when you use Smart Mesh to get the right result. Now, let's export it as FBX and take it all to Blender. In this video, I'm gonna export mostly in FBX just because it causes less issues, and at later stages, FBX is easier to transfer textures separately. You're gonna see that later when we bring all parts to Blender. It's time to do assembly. And here's how I do that. First of all, I'm gonna add the image reference from which we actually generated all the parts to a line on. So that's very easy in Blender. We're gonna just right click anywhere and add image and choose reference. Then gonna select the image that we need. And here we go, like it will be just on the background while we're working. The good thing about this image reference that is always visible even if we are working in not shaded mode. We're gonna place characters so fits are exactly on that red line, which is 0, like the ground basically. Now about this stage. The goal here is to assemble the character to fit the reference, basically. High poly or low poly, it doesn't matter at this stage because we still need to fit them all together. And it's very important to know that we don't really need to join all the objects. We still can keep most of them separated following the logic. And you can see most of the buttons that I'm pressing, and there is not a big magic. First of all, very useful mode is X-ray mode that allows to precisely fit it according to the reference. Next, of course, is simple control as moving, rotating, and scaling. You can use it with the controls here, or you can use the hotkeys. G for moving around according to the camera, S for scale, R for rotation. So the first part seems easy. Now there of course will be some parts overlapping, and in that case the other thing that we're gonna need to do at this stage is to cut overlapping parts and make sure they are seamless transition between parts. Like in my case happened with belly, so there was belly from the top part and also with the pants. So what we're gonna need to do is to go to the sculpting mode. Mainly there are a few things you need to know. There are brushes that do modify the mesh, and also there's like utility brushes such as mask. And mask do not modify mesh by itself, but work as a selection tool and help you with two main purposes. Select or deselect area that you do not want to edit, or do some operation at once to whole masked area, such as deleting one big part. So in this case I use mask brush. Again, it's very simple. Just select the mask brush, select whole belly area, like the body basically, and when it's selected we're gonna go mask slice and fill holes. One of the most useful thing. There's also mask slice that will pretty slice and leave the hole, but we always want to keep it capped. We do not want it to become hollow because that will cause some problems when we process the model. But very important, after you do that operation with mask, don't forget to go to mask and clear the mask. Otherwise, you will not be able to edit that area that is still masked after the cut. And then we can just smooth that cut. How do I do that? I switch to brush, not a mask brush, just the brush, and choose the smooth, or simply press Shift. It doesn't matter which brush you are currently using. If you press Shift, it will change it to smooth while you're holding that Shift, because it's most popular brush and most useful one. Also, one small tip that is for most of the brushes, including mask brush, while holding Ctrl will invert the action. So don't be worried if you paint something wrong. Just hold the Ctrl and paint that again. That will remove the mask, or do the opposite action for any brush such as clay brush or any other brushes. My favorite brush of all times is of course Elastic Wrap. Here is this guy which allow you to work with this geometry like with clay. It works very simple. You just grab some part and move around to align stuff. Here's how easy for me was to fix the pants around the belly, and 50% of the time I'm gonna use that brush. Another important thing to keep in mind is symmetrical objects. That's not only the right approach but also a huge time saver. For example, glows. I'm not going to do the duplicate of this object, or I don't need a second glow. I just gonna go and mirror this object. It's very simple to do. You just need to go to object mode while it's positioned right. And in object mode, we need to make sure that the origin of this object is in the center of the world coordinates, and that you apply all transformation. You can press Ctrl A and select rotation and scale. And then in modifier, just add the mirror modifier, and we're gonna choose X axis. That's it. So for now, we can keep it active. On the final stage, we're gonna simply apply that modifier, which will make it a real object. But for now, we're gonna keep it because it's still relevant for retopology, for texturing. We're gonna retopology once and just mirror that. And same thing for texture, right? Only once, and just keep it like that. I do have dedicated video on YouTube about sculpting if you want to dig more into details, or these basic tools are not enough. Or if you are really serious about learning this 3D AI workflow, I invite you to join my course made specifically for the beginners. I'm gonna guide you from very beginning to final character that you're gonna run in Unreal Engine or Unity. I'm gonna explain in details how to use best AI tools, their pros and cons, give you a solid foundation about 3D in general, so you're gonna be able to create any 3D character in less than a week. And only for my dear viewers, I'm gonna give away 5 courses. The only thing you need to do is drop the comment explaining why you should get the course, what you're about to create, what is your story. I always read all the comments. All links in the description. Let's continue. One last thing about sculpting that I want to add is that you need to understand that you work with bunch of polygons, and all these brushes work with that mess of polygons. And sometimes it might be not enough polygons, or you can generate low poly and try to do the sculpting. So to some brushes to work better, like a smooth brush, you might want to recalculate the density of the polygons. And here is one example. I was making the plate, and at some point smoothing was not really working because there was not much polygons, or after some join or cut operation, and you might want to go to remesh and just recalculate the polygons on this specific object while respecting the shape. Note, it's very important that you do this operation on non-hollow object, otherwise it will break it. So I recalculated it, and now everything works way better. Note that sculpting works pretty nice with low poly as well. Brush like Elastic Wrap is absolutely cool to use with low poly as well. But if you're gonna try other brushes such as clay or even smoothing, it might ruin the geometry because those brushes affect vertices and designed to work with high poly meshes. In my course, I cover both approaches, what tools to use with low poly, with high poly, etc. So depending on the complexity of your character and how much attention you pay to details, this might take a while. For me, this stage took me almost 1 hour, and that's fine. Now I have incredible high poly model for my armor, the body, glows, greaves, and that's done. So when high poly model is ready, we're gonna need to do low poly. And here we need to decide on which parts we actually gonna do the low poly and which way. So as you know, small accessories are already low poly, hair and head also low poly. So which left us only with the armor and the weapon. Now for some parts, I actually gonna do that manually with RetopoFlow add-on, just to show you that sometimes simple shapes is equally fast to do manually. Someone like QuadraMesher, I'm a big fan of RetopoFlow. I just enjoy that process a little bit. But for majority of parts, we're gonna use AI Retopology in Tripo or in Hunyuan. And don't forget about parts that are mirrored, such as greaves and glows. Now we're gonna export these objects one by one into FBX and take it to Tripo and Hunyuan. In Tripo, process looks simple. We're gonna click upload 3D model. Then when the model is loaded, we're gonna rotate it 90 degrees. Then that's it. We can now take it to Retopology. And here with Smart Low Poly, we're gonna choose the right amount. Now choosing right amount again here is very important. If you're gonna just set the max amount or the lowest amount, that's not do the right job. You're gonna find the right balanced amount for this specific object. So I gave it a try a few times and I figured out that 1.5 thousand works the best. However, you can see that real result is almost 2,000. That's because there's also inside algorithm that decide whether it can logically fit that budget or not. And this result is pretty decent, and some small imperfection I can address easily in Blender. Now there's one annoying thing working with Tripo Retopology. It changes the rotation and original positioning of the object. So when you take it back to Blender, you're gonna have to position it again, figure out the right scale, and I know that can be a little bit annoying. I'm also annoyed by that, but there is no really solution how to fix that. The good thing is that shape is actually following accurately. Another way is to go to Hunyuan 3D Studio, and here we can go to Retopology and upload our own model and also do the Retopology basically with version 1.5. And I pretty much always use low poly here because medium and high can add like extreme amount of polygons somewhere. We're gonna choose quads and hit generate. And here's the result. Despite choosing low for face count, it's still quite a lot. But again, here in Hunyuan, it is quite random. So here's another generation which is way better than it was the first, but we can download that. And the good thing about working with Hunyuan is that when you're gonna export LBX and drop it back to Blender, it will be exactly in the same position where you exported it. So big respect for that. I mean, it saves quite a lot of time. It's actually, like, some people asked me about this in the comments. So right now you know about that. Overall, when I do AI Retopology, I recommend to combine best tools and choose the best result. And you can always know which tool is the best right now from Top 3D AI Arena. It is still Tripo and of course the Hunyuan, and that's why I basically combine them together. And I know that Tripo is soon gonna do big update to low poly. Hopefully those small issues also will be addressed and we get even better results. Now let's grab all the best generation, whether that's from Tripo, Hunyuan, and take it all to Blender to start processing. Now here we're gonna need that RetopoFlow that I was referring to already a few times, and it's actually free to get, and I really like it. You can grab it on GitHub, go to releases, and just basically take the last version that supports Blender 5. So this process might be the longest if you're gonna do that first time, but I recommend you to do it once to get the idea what is the definition of nice mesh, which, trust me, still will be valuable skill in next few years at least. Working with AI is accepting that it can make mistake, but final judgment is on us, so we're gonna need to know whether that's mistake or no. We're gonna take glow that I generated in Hunyuan, and I'm gonna go over the mesh. So the idea of the mesh that it nicely follow the shape, forming like nice quads, lines, loops, etc. If you have no idea how good topology looks like, I can recommend to just Google some images of some specific parts like glows, and then you get the idea how the glows look like. And I'm also gonna share blend file of this character in final stage, so you can examine how it looks like and try to follow. So the first thing I did with my glow is that I removed completely some parts that are messy see and I don't like. Like here you can see there was some holes, some stretches where some amount of polygons that definitely should not be right there. It should be just nice squares covering all that area, and all that depth can be just bake it. Also, I really hate how Hunyuan does finger. Tripo does it really better, but I want to show you that this one can be quickly addressed with RetopoFlow. Now let's hide all the objects and leave only glow high poly and our low poly glow. And here in RetopoFlow, while low poly glow is selected, let's hit edit active. Okay, and here we go. So what we see, the light geometry is our low poly, and that solid black is the high poly. And our goal is to make some nice wireframe that follows the original shape. That's basically the whole deal. We need that to nicely wrap around the high poly. That will allow us to do the baking, transferring all that details, and basically do the main thing, look like the high poly while being low poly. And here there are very simple tools like PolyPen. This one is very simple. We can click on any edge or vertex, and then with holding Control, just create new polygons. Just like that. Hold one edge or vertex and create new polygon. And this PolyPen is so powerful that you can actually create whole Retopology only with this one. But that will be a little bit slow. But I remember myself when I first did Retopology, I was only using that tool and was able to create whole characters. But I was spending like days to do that. Here, for example, we do have a strokes tool, which allow us to select some edge. And if we're gonna continue some loops, we can actually repeat the same amount of divisions like this. So we select some edges. While they are selected, we start drawing another like this, and just like that we're covering this whole region, and it looks way better than it was before. We can switch to PolyPen and cover this area. Some other tools here works extremely well with AI generated meshes like loops. Hunyuan low poly often have this blank areas where it definitely lacks of some polygons. That's where you can just add a loop holding Control, just add one more division if it's necessary to repeat the curvature of the object, for example, or for animation later, etc. Now one more thing I'm gonna show you how to do these fingers. I'm gonna choose contour and just draw the line across the finger. Now here you can see there is O and 60, 13 I can control with holding shift and wheel. That is basically amount of divisions. And I guess you can guess that if I do the drawing on top, it will basically create another loop, adding all of that. Boom. It is important that it works from the camera angle, so do the camera angle. And by the way, if it's difficult to navigate in Blender and all of that controls, I explain all the basics how to work with Blender and controls and stuff in my free YouTube videos. Link will be somewhere here. Now here's bad advice from me. It's bad because many professionals will not gonna like it. The amount of time you want to spend on the Retopology completely depends on the purpose of this model. The same is true for amount of details. I have experience with this tool and I wanted to create a very good realistic character, so I added more details, work it through all fingers and make them absolutely nice, also ready for baking. But if you're creating isometric games where you will never get close to the characters and too close to his hands, you definitely don't need to spend that much time and give it less polygons, and you will process it way faster. RetopoFlow part is done. Now we can exit RetopoFlow, save the results, and I recommend usually to check the face orientation. Face orientation is where the normal's face. Then we can add Auto Smooth with 180 to see how well it ended up, and also maybe do some additional checks afterwards. In my course, I also cover Blender native toolset to work with low poly to process all that edges and stuff. That's also one of the way to do that and works exceptionally great together with RetopoFlow. And here's one more example just to show you that I can also do manual Retopology. Answer to all haters. Well, I was doing that for a decade more, and sometimes it can be same time as using AI. I'm gonna do the mask. It's very simple object. And let's say I want to make it exceptionally optimized. Go to RetopoFlow and press plus active because we're gonna need to create additional mesh. And here we're gonna start with polypen. Just click Ctrl and start drawing the polygons. So first we're gonna do the outer contour, then a little bit in the inner contour to follow the shape. Then let's draw some details like this middle part. I'm gonna just repeat it like this. And again, you can see I'm pressing vertices on the edges of geometry. That makes perfect sense because I want geometry to cover that edges so I later can repeat. And when I have all the basics done, I can speed up significantly with strokes, for example, then move some vertices again to the edges to follow the shape better, repeat the same process for another part of the object, and we're almost done. Now I just need to do the closing. So what I'm gonna do, again, I'm gonna extrude just one polygon, like one row from top and from bottom, then kind of connect it on sides and just select all of this with Ctrl Shift and use the patching. I don't need extra details inside of the mask. I mean, you can add it with the loops, but I don't really think it's needed. And I could say I'm done. I just want to take care about this one little button. And so it's baked well into the normal texture. Again, like the only goal here is that to make sure that it is covered, like geometry covers that. Let's do the same thing, add the mirror modifier and just align this middle edges, move them a little bit so they bridge the gap. All this hack, by the way, is sort of scale it by X so it formed this straight line, which I actually did. And here we go, a little bit more than 5 minutes. We have the mask. While listening to music or watching something in the background, I repeated all of this process for the rest of the models, and here you can see all the results. File will be shared for your examination in the description. Totaling, we have 60,000 triangles, which I think is very decent. Again, I'm creating really cool character for Unreal Engine that's like main person. I think that's more than enough. Now, the next stage before we can give it some colors is to UV unwrap. Basically, imagine yourself as a tailor and we need to cut it into one flat paper to paint it. That's basically what UV does. And we do have AI options here, so far only with Hunyuan in 3D AI Studio. Let's do the most complex case with hairs. You go to UV unwrapping, you select the model that you exported as FBX, and do the stuff. Sometimes it gives absolutely shitty result like this one, and sometimes it can do the good job like this one, for example, which we gonna take most like, but it still have some issues that I'm gonna show you how you can process, or alternatively we can just do UV unwrapping manually to get the max possible result. For me, UV unwrapping is probably the easiest part and I really enjoy that because that's just like cutting mesh into layouts. So here's our hair model we did in Hunyuan. And the first thing we want to do is go to edge and clear sharp, because for some reason it adds this sharps that's highlighted like blue. Also in a UV map menu, we're gonna find this one and set angles as yes. That will help us to understand whether this UV actually is suitable for texturing. So the color here basically reflects the stretching. If there will be something red or closer to that shades, that will mean that is extremely stretched, and most likely one pixel will cover like some very close area, which will cause the blurry, distorted texture, which we don't want. However, there are some pieces like this that we also don't want, like very small islands, etc. So here's one cool approach how you can process AI UV. On UV, enable this setting that will synchronize UV and the mesh, which will allow you to select something like this, and you can go to 3D view, click dots on the numpad, and you will be able to see where exactly this piece belongs. So we can see that this piece belongs to this small strap. Here we go. And you can see that there's plenty of seams. These red lines are seams that are used to unwrap it. Now, on simpler objects, you might not have these problems at all, but I just want to show you most difficult case, how you can address it and what you're actually gonna need to do. So we're gonna try to fix this strand. I'm gonna select one edge and click Ctrl L and then click normal. That will select all mesh that is connected by normals. And now we're gonna just clean all the seams. How to do that? Right click, find that, clear seams. Well, and you can see there is no red lines. Instead, we're gonna select one long line on one edge that will sort of like split it in half, like unwrap it by the length. And so I basically added seam myself. That is, by the way, what is UV about, adding seams. Now let's select this object and unwrap angle based. Boom, nice straight line. Now let's enable everything back with Alt-H before I hit it with Shift-H. And I'm gonna use UV Packer, which is also a free add-on for Blender. You can use that with Blender native tools, but they don't work that well. Basically, just to pack and make sure they are not overlapping each other. And same thing you can do for other parts. In some cases, you just want to remove some seams and re-unwrap them. Like this, for example, same issues here. Again, we can do the same operation. For the rest of the objects, they do have very simple shapes. And I tend to make this myself, especially since we have symmetric objects, which I split before in the middle and enabled the mirror modifier. You can see that. Why? To save time on texturing stage, and that is also a very good approach for game development, since all this half will use one big texture. That sort of like increase the overall resolution of texture usage. So let's place seams like if we are a tailor. The idea is basically the same as with real clothing. You put seams exactly where it's less visible, right? I have seams here, here, here. Well, to be honest, like it's exactly the same for garments, at least. For some appendixes, such as spikes, buttons, something that goes really off, you can actually separate them and cut them alone. Just make sure that you add enough seams that this specific part can be flattened, unwrapped into something flat, right? Like you're working with paper. Just like that, set all seams. When that's ready, we can select all object, simply press A in edit modes and right click, unwrap angle based. Boom. We have every part nicely placed. Everything's good. We can additionally check stretching. If you can see anything closer to red shades, maybe you need to add some additional cuts. In my case, I'm pretty happy. Then we can do that for all the rest of the parts. And 30 minutes later, I have all objects unwrapped. Now, here's one more important thing if we want to get really good quality of our model. It is how we organize materials, amount of texture, etc. So here what you see is how I organize different materials. Each color is different materials. And I guess you can read the logic. Here, one material, face, one material, all accessories in one material, body, armor, and weapon. Now, why I'm telling about this now, it's because it is related to UV, of course. Like with armor, for example, my last step was to select all the armor pieces that meant to be one material and unwrap them all together. You can do that by selecting them all at once, go to UV and do the angle based, and then just pack them all together. Now they all can use one texture, one material with same settings. And that's also easier to manage rather than having 20 different materials and always be confused. And with UV ready, it means that we can do the baking. Mainly we do need a normal map. Normal map contains all these geometry details and stuff. So right now, if you take a look on your low poly model, it definitely lacks a lot of details. Now, how do we fix that? We're gonna bake normal map, and I'm also gonna show you how to bake ambient occlusion map, which can be used in engine like Unity or Unreal Engine for different purposes to add additional depths, etc. Or you can even merge it with color map. How do we do that? So here are the steps to take. We're gonna go into the shader of our low poly model, and you can create a simple shader just pressing the new here. And we need to create a texture. Let's call it cloth normal. For normal map, by the way, it is connected to a normal map additional node in Blender. That's how Blender works. So we're gonna need to create that node as well. Now, make sure that this node is selected. Then we're gonna go to Render tab here and choose Cycles Engine. All the bakings in Blender only work in cycles. And then scroll to the tab called Bake. That's where we're gonna spend next half an hour. Here we have different bake types, and let's start with the normal map. Then we're gonna activate selected to active, and I'm gonna set extrusion. Let's start with 0.01. The extrusion of the cage is that additional coverage on top of low poly that will take into account all geometry between the original surface and extruded surface, like high poly and low poly. So basically baking, just transfer that information into the map. Now click on high poly, then click with shift on low poly model, and make sure the nodes with the new texture that we created selected, and hit the bake button. That will bake that information into the selected node texture on this shader menu. And here you can see it's something baked, and we can actually preview that. Let's create here the texture preview, and we can see that. So we can review if there are some artifacts, and artifacts usually look like green, yellow stuff, or like some bold green that basically says that some area wasn't covered by geometry, etc. And that is when we're gonna need to go and play a little bit with the cage extrusion value. So to address these issues, we can play with settings. Like, let's try to enable cage and play a little bit with the values. I tried lower value, which gave me more artifacts, so I know now that I need to go into the opposite direction, and I ended up with 0.06, which gave me the best result. And here's how it looked like. You can see that all the details basically transferred to our low poly. Now you remember that some objects actually share one material, and you may ask, like, but how do I bake it into one map, because that's basically the same map? Well, that's not a problem. We're gonna use the same exact image and same material, just disable this clear image in output of the baking. What it's gonna do is that it will keep what we already baked, and again, like, the UV is not overlapping. That's what you need to take care of in the previous stage. That's what I explained, right? Just select those objects that share one material in edit mode and then wrap it together so they are not overlapping. And just like that, I also bake it pans, and here we can review this. Here in Blender, you can do the lighting settings to see like how actually light will interact with it. And the normal map, again, it imitates geometry, so it interacts with the light, which is absolutely cool. Now what you see is low poly model that looks like high poly. And let's repeat the process for other parts. Sometimes you might face situation when everything is perfect, but some small parts just not working out. Like, there might be very deep stuff, or maybe you did the UV wrong, and to not rework everything, etc., you can simply go to texture paint and, let's say, use smear brush. Here's the cheat code from me. You can use it. No extrusion here, etc. Another interesting map that is baked pretty much the same way is Ambient Occlusion. So we're creating a map, and here instead of normal, we're gonna choose Ambient Occlusion. Also, we select high poly, low poly, but for ambient occlusion, you need to make sure that it takes into account surrounding objects, because it's like for this inner shadow. So if you don't want this to happen, you're gonna need to isolate all other objects in render mode. I'm gonna do that behind the scene. Here is the final results, and it looks just amazing. More details how to do baking in Blender or Marmoset, also an amazing tool for baking, is in my another YouTube video, or of course you can find it in my 3D AI course. Now I already feel how cool it will end up. What we're gonna do next is, of course, texturing. And there are a few ways how we can do that. One of the easiest way, and sometimes it works extremely well, is to texture it with AI completely as one object, which I'm gonna do for hair in Tripo, of course. So you upload your 3D model, go to texture tab, upload the reference, and here you go. The result is amazing. But there's often some small things that you definitely want to tackle. And for that, I have another amazing tool called Modif, which is, by the way, still free, but you cannot create private projects. Now let's bring it all to Modif. But don't forget about any modifiers that you were using, like you can keep them, like mirror modifier, you can keep them on this stage, but if you have any of them, when exporting GLB, I recommend GLB to use with Modif. Go to Mesh and enable Apply Modifier setting. That will bake all modifiers in Mesh and you will see exactly the same thing in Modif. Otherwise, it will look broken. So here's our character here in Modif, and let's do the texturing. So how do we do that? First of all, we can drop all the reference images here by pressing plus. And we're gonna drop all the same images that we were using to create it. Now go to Texture tab. And here we're gonna work object by object. The process here look extremely simple. We select a reference and select a view of our model. Well, obviously we need the reference that matching the current object, and then we can generate something and paste it on a 3D model. One of the way is like to put them as layers, and another way is to patch. My workflow here looks like this. I go view by view and patch it, create some additional image references until I have like the 90% done. The good thing about Modif is that you can do additional references right here. Let's say to complete the backside, I'm gonna need to create a variation. So it's just gonna go click create variation and say like backside view generates, and here we go. Like if you're not happy, just generate it once again or specify some details, add it as another reference and use it for another view, generate it, put it on the back. And here we go. Now, of course, there will be some problems and seams and details, or you can generate that in Tripo and bring it here. And how do you address it? Here's the patching tool. First, you're gonna need to select that area that you don't like, select the right reference for it, and it will generate the fix. But now, instead of putting everything at once, we can only work with that area that we're not happy with, like just boom, and just with brush, just address this area. That's whole thing. One by one, asset by asset, we're gonna do exactly the same thing. There are a few more tools presented here in Modif, such as masking and maybe some like filling holes, etc. But again, main tools are layers and patching. They together are more than enough to get a complete nice result. Also, there are some important settings that affect whether this will be affected by light or albedo. But to explain all of that and show you complete process on all of the parts, I created another video. Take a look. This video is already long and I still have to show you some cool thing I never showed before. So here in Modif, let's finish everything except eyes. Yeah, there is no eyes and we don't need them because eyes are better made from spheres. Well, that's all done. Export everything as FBX, or we can export color textures alone. Now, one thing is that it will export it per objects, and since I haven't joined the objects before I import it into the Modif, I get 4 maps and they're supposed to be one map. So you can do that in different ways. One way, you can use paint nets and add them all as layers, or you can use Photoshop if someone still uses Photoshop and just combine them like this. So basically add any black layer just to see what's happening and save them as one image. Alternatively, you can give all these 4 images to your Claude Code and ask to do the same. It will do that with no problems. Now we have one texture that we can bring to Blender and connect. And here we go. It starts to look so much better. I connected to all of the objects and something is off. And what's off is the material, because what we did in Modif, we only created the color map together with the normal map. Of course, it will look cool, so you can see that normal map is also work. That's why armor look a little bit better, but the materials very important. So you can actually do that with Tripo and add the PBR. Just upload your object to Tripo through upload. Since we already have the texture, we're gonna need to go to PBR. Here is our object. You can see there's no PBR, and just generate the PBR. And here we go. It's definitely look better than it was, but it's not perfect. I definitely want metal to be shinier, so keep it as an option in mind. For some object, it can work pretty well. What I want to show you, and the reason reason why I separated armor in one object, for example, is that you can create nice material maps with AI model like Patina. You can find it in PolyAI, just name it Patina. It is very cheap. There is text to material, image to material option. And with ChatGPT, I figure out some brushed metal patterns. And let's generate and see how it looks. I'm gonna generate 2K texture for max resolution. There are some settings. I don't need height and normal, so we just need roughness and metalness because we already have normal map. But again, you can additionally use that if you know how to merge all of them. I'm gonna do that in a simple way. And here we have the patterns. This one I didn't liked, and this one I actually liked. So we're gonna take this one. Yeah, this is exactly how I want it to look. Now, what we're gonna need to do is go to the material, and here, let's drop these two maps, metallic and roughness, and let's connect them. Very important to make sure that these new maps, since they are like property maps, set it to non-color. And here's how it looks like. Well, it 100% look way better than it was. Well, usually you want to control the scale of this pattern. So you can see like it's too big, right? That's very easy to do. We're gonna need two things. Well, two nodes basically. Click on the texture and Control T. That will create these two amazing nodes that will allow us to control scale. And we're gonna also connect it to the roughness. So now we have control over scale, and we can select them all together and control this pattern. Also, UV doesn't work really great for a tiled texture, so we can change it to generated. And how about that, right? Ooh. Amazing. I think it's way nicer. And again, since this is like one shared material, you can see that it applied to all other objects. Look amazing. Now, the question is, how do we export all this construction to Unreal Engine? Well, if you try to just export it like this, it's not gonna work. We're gonna need one map similar to color map using the UV, of course. And for that, we can also do baking. We're gonna need to bake a roughness and metallic map. So I'm gonna create new map, make sure it's selected, also select the material output, go to bake, and here just choose the roughness. Of course, we disable selected to active because it's all happen within one object. You can choose clear image and just press bake. And we can see it's something baked, but only for glows. Now, here's the thing. To do the baking at this stage, we're gonna first select all the objects, and we're also gonna need to make sure that all modifiers, such as mirror, are applied. Triangulate, you can keep, and we can actually join all the objects. So yeah, since they share one material, why not? Let's join, and boom. And you can see this artifact, some object is black after joining. Let me show you how to fix that. It's very simple. It means that most likely the UV there has different name. Yeah, so we're gonna name it as the UV in every other object. Now, if we join it, everything works fine. And we can rename these objects to metal. Now we can repeat the baking, and all objects are now in one map. We can save that texture, and we can connect it, set it to non-color, and connect it instead of that generated. And we can see the result is basically the same. We're gonna repeat that process for metallic map, and now it's ready to be exported in Unreal Engine, and you're gonna see same results. This approach can be used for many things, but it's not the only one. I also have another free video on my channel specifically about materials, explaining how you can tackle one object that consist of different materials, some rough parts, some shiny parts, all of that also possible to tackle in Blender or any other software. Professionals appreciate a lot Sculpting Painter software. You can take a look on another video about Pro Workflow. There I explain some professional tools involved to make it even better, but Sculpting Painter can take a while to learn. Well, it gives you a lot of control and can work really well with AI generated color texture. And sometimes for simple objects, it's more than enough to just tackle some settings in the PBR shader to get the result that you want. I'm gonna complete that part behind the scene, so take a look on that video for more information or join my course. But now I'm gonna teach you one more cool way how to get realistic eyes and eyelashes. So normally I was showing you that we can just create a sphere, smooth it, and apply the color texture. You can see that in my previous videos, but professional approach is to use double sphere to make it more like real eye. So for that one, we're gonna go and download MetaHuman Conform Topology. It's absolutely free. We just need this head. We're gonna take the eye from it. So we're gonna delete everything except the eye. So here you can see how the shape looks like. And there is a small bump or convex, and it also unwrapped nicely. And that's exactly what we need. So here's the trick. First of all, we're gonna need to generate texture, realistic texture of the eye. I think something like that. It should not be that much red. Okay, we're gonna bring it here, and we're also gonna duplicate the eye. One eye will be sort of transparent and extremely glossy, right? So here's how I set the material, and see, blended. Okay, I'm gonna set it in Blender, but again, depending on the game engine, you might need to do some additional settings in game engine. Anyway, the idea is that it's almost transparent and glossy. Now for the main eyeball, we're gonna go to it, and here I'm gonna move this part a little bit inside in proportional editing to achieve some shape like this. And now we can drop our texture here and connect it. Boom. Okay, it's a little bit off, so in UV I'm gonna move it a little bit to follow more nicely with my eye. Okay, that's it. And yeah, let's set the material. It should be also a glossy material. Boom, like that. That little bit transparency, and yeah, the base color, I forgot to set the base color to white, so there is no additional shading. Okay, here we go. So this additional transparent sphere adds nice glare to give it more realistic look. How cool is that? And that was extremely simple. If you still didn't press that like button, it's about time. And now, how do we do eyelashes? It's very simple. With Shift, let's click somewhere on the eye. And that will be our starting point to draw the eyelashes. Then we're gonna create mesh and single vert. That's a single lonely vertex. Then we go to edit modes, and we're gonna enable this mode that will basically attach every vertex to the polygons that we create. And we're gonna press E to extrude that lonely vertex into a line of lonely vertices, basically forming an eyelash line, right? So we just created like a line. We can disable the shading to see it like more prominently. When that's done, we can actually disable magnets. Now it actually follows. Select all of them and extrude once again. That's pretty much it. We already have basic shape. Now just adjust the shape. You can add some additional loops to achieve some curvature. So here's how I do that. And let's go generate some mask texture with Gemini. That's so simple right now. Again, like you can even screenshot and bring it to Nano Banana and say like, I need a mask texture because again, it will be used as an alpha, right? That's basically an opacity. So white color says what's not transparent, and black what is transparent. You're gonna need to adjust UV, of course, like that. So just move it a little bit around, scale it, and just a while later, we have eyelashes done. Same way you can do the bottom eyelash. Very, very simple. All together, that takes like 10 minutes or more. And then, of course, just mirror it to another eye, since your face should be symmetrical. How cool is that? I mean, I think it looks just fantastic. So here's our beautiful girl with all the materials. And last part before we bring our character to Unreal Engine is to do the rigging. We're gonna do that through AccuRig. So let's select the character, export it to AccuRig, and import it here. So long story short, what's going on in AccuRig? It's a very simple process because you will be guided all the time. First, choose the middle line. Fine, then do the rigging. Do not worry that your materials doesn't look same here in AccuRig. Basically, you can ignore materials at all. It's just a preview here, and we will reset it when we get back the rigged version. Another step is to place the markers. And this one is quite important. So take a look very carefully on the tips here on the right and try to position them nicely. Sometimes if you will get bad results, go back at this stage and try to move these points around. After a while, you'll get the idea how does it works and what is the best position for some markers. You do that for the body, and then you do that for each hand. When you go to the hand, by the way, it will ask you how many fingers do you have, so you can get the idea that even if you have a character with less than 5 fingers, that's totally fine. You can also rig it here. Not an issue. And then you, of course, set the markers for fingers as well. Let's do that and press calibrate. And calibration basically is the rigging itself. So here we go. I really like this stage because it's like your character suddenly is alive. Like, look, I'm alive. I can see myself. Woo! She look a little bit creepy with these white eyes. Okay, you can see the walking. Sometimes for some characters, you might want to do the pose offset. I'm super lucky I have everything nearly perfect, except some weights, which we're gonna address in Blender. But there is dedicated video about rigging, of course, on my channel. So let's go and export it to Unreal Engine. AccuRig, by the way, is absolutely free, but the catch here is that if you want to use their animations, they do have like a huge library of different animations for various purposes. You're gonna need to buy them. I don't really need that because we're gonna retarget it in Unreal Engine and use it there. Okay, so let's bring our character here. Okay, and so we're gonna hide armature and we're gonna need to reassign the materials. So we'll just go through each material and set the right one without this one. And now we can go to the pose mode and move the bones around and see that it works. And it works indeed, but usually in some places like armpits, we can see that when we move the arm, the part of the body moves when it should not. And this is all about the weight correction. One of the easiest way to do that is that we're gonna select the armature, then we're gonna select the object and go to weight paint. Do that in exactly this order. That will allow you to shift control on any bone and see what area is affected by that bone. Now, here we do have a brush, and brush basically set the color. The color reflects how much this particular bone affects this particular area of the mesh. So blue means 0, meaning that it will not take control over it. But we still see that I remove some weight, but there's still some movement. This is because like of another bone. So we're gonna need to fix this one a little bit more, right? Just like that, you can make the movement nicer. For hair, it's a little bit different case. We just need to set all hair to be following the heads. How do we do that? Let's select the hair, then let's select that armature, go to weight paint. Now here, shift control, and we need to select the head bone exactly. Basis, let's find that head bone. Oh, this one is this small, which is head. Then we're gonna go set weight to 1, and in weights, set weights. What I just did, I set 100% weights on head bone for hair, which I also gonna do to the accessories. Yep, behind the scene, I also put the accessories into the hair. That was very easy. And now if we move around the heads, we can see that everything works as expected. Later on, you can actually add additional bones in animated, which I think I'm gonna do later in Unreal Engine. And congratulations to myself, this character is done. Altogether, it took a little bit more than 2 days, but I'm extremely happy. And just few years ago, I couldn't imagine I will be able to do such a cool character in such short terms. In fact, it ended up so nice that I decided to do some additional cool setup in Unreal Engine, which you're gonna see now. So first of all, of course, adding some physics to hairs, some additional setup in Unreal Engine, set up a small scene and do this cool camera renders so you can have that amazing intro video which you saw in the beginning. By the way, Unreal Engine 5.8 is absolute gold. I already made few videos about new metahumans, about new markerless motion capture, MCP, all that great stuff. It's all on my channel. It's absolutely amazing. It allows you to move really fast, and all of that is basically free. And guys, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave the comments. Making this long videos takes a lot of effort, but I really believe you're gonna learn a lot from it. So that was Steph as usual. See you in the next one.